Yes. And just a little bit about yes. So a little bit about the aims of my research. So essentially, I'm looking into different media of storytelling that they can be easily created by an archaeologist to engage audiences with their research. So the media that I looked into actually were designed by me, and that's the whole point of the research. And they have some broader aims. First of all, obviously, the knowledge dissemination. My case study is Grave Circle A, a Bronze Age cemetery. We will see it in a moment. Also, to rehumanize skeletal remains. It's something that I'm interested into, and I did that through storytelling and discuss ethics around how we handle human remains. To open up archaeological research, to tell people that archaeologists do not always have the answers about the past, and that's the way it is, especially about prehistory, and to decolonize the history of excavations and discuss Stamatakis, the Greek archaeologist, contribution to the research. Now, I need to put a disclaimer here about decolonizing Greek heritage in particular. It is quite weird. It's different than decolonizing, let's say, indigenous people's heritage. Because normally in this situation, decolonization means to strengthen the links of people with their ancestors, their land, and their heritage. But Greece is a crypto colony. It's not an actual colony, an official one. That's an entirely other talk, but well, we're getting there. And yeah, so essentially, a crypto colony is a nation that, when it was founded, other people decided its identity, and then people adopted it when they created the nation. And essentially, then they perform under this identity and defend it. For Greece, that would mean the classical era of democracy, or even further back, which is my case study, the Homeric epics and the Mycenaean world of the warriors. So when we talk about decolonization of this heritage, it would mean for the Greeks to shed this identity instead of further tighten their claims on this heritage, which is very weird. So yeah, the methodology that I developed to evaluate the impact of the media that I created, because I couldn't find any methodology to evaluate DIY archaeological projects. There is obviously, but nothing that would fit my purpose. So I created a methodology. The research strategy is a practice-based research. It's highly interdisciplinary because it combines elements of digital archaeology, public archaeology, bioarchaeology of personhood, archaeogamic, and storytelling. The research philosophy is pragmatism. It allows for some flexibility in decision-making and design, and the research type is concurrent embedded mixed methods design. So I collected both quantitative and qualitative data, and I merged the data sets to address my research questions. The media that I created, they are the standard typical media, a textual story with footnotes following Boutin's example of bioarchaeology, an interactive digital narrative, an IDN, which I need to say here that it is a digitally mimetic IDN. So essentially, it was based on the textual story, so it wasn't digitally born, because I had to compare the media, so they had to include exactly the same amount of information. And an immersive story, which again, in my case study, it was a 360 film. So not a 3D reconstructed environment, but rather a 360 film that it was meant to be viewed with headset, a VR headset. The tools to actually write the story were osteological reports. They were very recent. I'll explain later why. Archaeological reports, it's an old excavation, 19th century. Material culture inscriptions on linear bit tablets, and some elements of the Homeric epics. So yes, this is tiny bit details about the case study. So my case study is Grave Clay at Mycenae. I don't know if I can point with this thing. Oh yeah, if I move the mouse, you can see. So essentially, Grave Clay is this cemetery here. It contains 6 graves. But about chronology, the graves are late Helladic I, which is 1500 BC, and the encirclement is way later, is Mycenaean, along with the Cyclopean fortifications around it. So the interesting element is that we don't know who these people were and what was the relationship with the people who built actually the Cyclopean walls, the Mycenaeans. And not only build walls, but they changed the entrance. So it was somewhere here, but they changed it to be here. They built this massive ramp, very elaborate lion gate. So every person who enters the Acropolis, they pass by Grave Clay. It's very theatrically staged, let's say. So yeah, that's about the chronology. And to understand a bit geographically, you can see Greece here. So Mycenae is this, is right there in Peloponnese. A closer look at the Acropolis, you just saw a person enters through the Lion Gate, and on the right hand, exactly when they enter, is Grave Clay. My case study is Grave 5, and especially this individual right here with the code name MYC1. Or with the letter T, which in Greek is pronounced Tav. He was buried with the famous so-called Agamemnon's mask. So yeah. So about the story, what information is included actually in the story? Obviously, the late Helladic one. So based on osteological reports and archaeological reports, I have recreated the life and potential death of the person. And I discuss elements of this period, but I also, which is the knowledge, the pedagogy. So everything that has to do with knowledge that I'm assessing is about this era. The decolonization element is about the excavation. So it is a very old excavation, 19th century. It was conducted with funds by Schliemann, very prominent person in Mycenaean archaeology. However, the Greek government appointed Stamatakis to supervise Schliemann because it was a Greek excavation. And also Schliemann had troubles with the Turkish government. He had just smuggled Priam's treasure out of the country and he was on a trial. So he had to have a supervisor. Obviously, he didn't like it at all. So the relationship between the two people is very rocky. And we know all this from letters that both wrote to people, complaining about each other. So Stamatakis wrote to his superior, complaining about Schliemann and not doing his work properly, bribing people to dig, to dig further, to do, like, he was allowed to have 30 workers, but he had 100 because he bribed them. And then we had Schliemann, who was complaining about Stamatakis. He didn't even mention his name. He was calling clerk. He was calling him clerk. So yeah, things like that to point out that, archaeology was, the Greek archaeology was, he didn't care about the Homeric past. He was trying to save everything. But Schliemann was devoted to find the Homeric past because that's Greece. And then these skeletal remains, they were transferred to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, again in the 19th century, and they were studied. And then some of the remains, particularly of grade 6, not 5, they were misplaced. Most probably due to World War II, they were misplaced in another room, they got lost. You know how these things are. And they were recently, in 2003, not very recently, but yeah, in 21st century anyways, they were rediscovered. And that kicked a whole series of re-examination of the bones until 2007. So that's another element that I'm discussing to address the treating of human remains and discuss ethics around it. So the story has 3 characters, the individual with the code name MYC15. In the stories, he's presented like he has forgotten who he is, what his name is, because we don't know his name. So he thinks his name is Tough because that's what he hears, that's how the letter is pronounced in Greek. The Greek archaeologist Stamatakis and the osteologist who did the analysis, Dr. Nafilioti. That's how the text looks like. So you can see is a tiny text, and then underneath is footnotes to explain everything. It's based on Boutin's model, but I have to say that it's called like the archaeology of personhood. Osteobiography. Sorry, model. So in her examples, the footnotes are way less. However, I wanted to be very upfront with exactly what elements I have used, and that's why it looks like that. The IDN looks like this, the interface, so that's some screenshots of the game. As I said, it is a digitally mimetic, and it is also a passive IDN, which means that the user doesn't have much option. So whatever decision the user makes, it still, the story goes on. The difference is that the user can, exactly as with the footnotes, they can read more or they can skip things. Again, it was a matter of comparison. So I had to include exactly the same information in the textual story, in the Twine story, and in the VR. So then I would be able to actually measure any difference. Yeah, that's the tools that I use to create the IDN. And you'll see a short video of how it looks like when you play it. And that's the interface, the coding aspect of it. It looks terrible, but it's not that bad. It's actually pretty straightforward. And right now it has been even better, and it doesn't require that much coding anymore. Okay, imagine this sound. because literally, Caitlin had.
Caitlin had sound?
Yes, because I heard the video playing. Okay, here, anyways, it doesn't matter. The sound doesn't really matter. Just check that. No? Okay, but it matters with the video. Anyways, so yeah, that's how it looks like. No, it doesn't want to go further. Yes. And then I created a 360 field. So as I said, it is not a 3D built environment, for example, using Unity. It is a shot of the lab, the PaleoHub lab, in 360, which is in a loop. And you should be able to see how it is, but the sound here is quite important. Anyways, so I use the 360 camera, Premiere Pro to edit it, Epidemic Sound, Viveport to introduce it to the headset, and I have actually tested it in both Vive and the Oculus, and it works absolutely fine. No sound.
She's not on.
Okay, it's fine. Okay, I'll play it, but essentially there is a narrator talking, so yeah. It begins in a completely darkness, and suddenly, so essentially the person who is wearing the headset is in total black, and suddenly they hear a voice, they don't know what's happening, and then they can, the lights go on and they can actually see around. And there is a narration going on, which you cannot hear.
Yes.
And you can move around the PaleoHub and explore, but you cannot interact actually with anything. It's purely immersive.
You're the only person.
So then the experiment that I did, I conducted both surveys and interviews to collect both qualitative and quantitative data. I did a pilot study before, and actually I had to adjust the material and the questionnaires, and I conducted the experiment in 3 countries, in the UK, in Malta, and Greece, with different group of people. So the process of the experiment was that 3 individuals got a pre-questionnaire, then they experienced 1 medium each, then a post-questionnaire, and then everybody rotated with the media. So then we gathered for an interview. So all 3 participants had experienced all 3 media, but I have only captured the difference between the first medium. I ended up having 3 data sets, interviews, and the metadata notes, which essentially is my qualitative data, pre and post questionnaire comparison to assess what knowledge they had and what knowledge they acquired, and post questionnaire questions only, which I assess any new knowledge, completely new knowledge based on the stories. I analyzed everything with reflective semantic analysis, the qualitative data. I personally believe that's an amazing tool for analysis. It has 6 steps. The familiarization phase was very easy for me because I was the person who conducted the interviews, and then I personally transcribed them. So the familiarization was pretty straightforward. Then I coded the data with NVivo, and I generated the themes. And this is a back and forth situation. You review the themes, and then you create the report. The themes now that came up from the reflective semantic analysis regarding the media, Twine seemed to have been the favorite, the idea is essentially the favorite medium, and specifically the interactive aspect of it. People really like to interact. Even if the choices were limited, they really liked that they had to click and decide what they have to experience or not. Another thing was that authenticity is very important. So even with the massive footnotes, everybody really liked that they knew what was fictive and what was based on exactly what evidence. Another thing that came up was the first encounter bias, which is something that Peter knows, but I'll tell in a moment. So the first encounter bias apparently is a bias saying that people tend to like more the medium that they first experience, no matter the medium. And so I had to look closer into that because that was a very interesting thing that I never have heard about before. Another thing was that the order of experience might actually affect the results. And people kept talking about the combination of media, and that they would have liked a combination of media. They knew that in normal situations they would have only experienced 1 medium, but they kept mentioning the combination of media, so I had to take it into consideration. Then another theme, a group of themes was about ethics regarding the treatment of human remains, which obviously is not unexpected. And it was embedded in the stories, but it was interesting to see how people thought about it. There were people, for example, that they thought that they saw wounds on the skeleton, which they couldn't have seen because it was a plastic lab skeleton. So the levels of empathy was quite interesting to observe. They suggested that we might need to stop having skeletons in museums because skeletal remains in museums because it's human beings. Another thing was about the endangerment of artifacts, which was very interesting because most people, instead of perceiving Stamatakis as a victim or of the behavior of Schliemann, they were mostly worried about how this rocky relationship would affect archaeology, which was very interesting to see and quite unexpected. They focused a lot on the fact that archaeology has changed in methods and practices, and we now can understand better the past, but it is okay that we cannot know all the answers. And regarding colonialism, again, an embedded theme, that was very interesting because the groups, as I said, they were 2 groups in the UK, mostly British people, 4 groups in Malta, all Maltese, a former colony, and two groups in Greece, a crypto colony. And also it was a mix of people. For example, the British people were mostly heritage practitioners or archaeologists, but they didn't know much about Mycenae. And then in Malta, most people were involved in the creation of virtual reality. So they had strong opinions about the primitive nature of my VR, obviously. And they didn't know anything about Mycenae as well, but they have strong heritage, and most of them they work in heritage, but their heritage. And then the Greeks, they didn't know anything about technology. Most of them, it was their first time experiencing VR, and they weren't archaeologists, but they knew a lot about Mycenae. But again, from the perspective of what they have been taught in schools. For example, they didn't even know Samatakis, which was very interesting to see the discourses there. The quantitative analysis, obviously, I had to compare the pre and the post questionnaires, study the post questionnaires only, as I said, and then I merged the data, quantitative and qualitative, to shed light to nuances. So, for example, about the medium, after merging the data, Twine still was the best. So even in the quantitative analysis, people who experienced Twine, they scored higher, and they had better understanding of the whole knowledge that I presented to them. However, the people who experienced VR, they were more emotionally attached to the characters, which was very interesting to see, because it's just a 360 film and not a super high, amazing virtual reality experience, but it was still very emotive. And then regarding the first encounter bias, that's a no. It didn't actually appear. I analyzed the data, the quantitative, and they confirmed that this wasn't the case. And same thing about the order of experience, it didn't seem to matter after analyzing the quantitative data. So that was very interesting to see that the qualitative data brought up some things that then the quantitative data said, no, that's not something. Although my sample was quite small, so further research might be needed in that. And regarding the colonialism, I just told you it was interesting to see, especially the Greek participants, how they reacted towards the fact that they didn't know anything about Samatakis. So to wrap things up, I think final time. So yes, so obviously that's not all my conclusions, but due to time restrictions, these are some prominent things that I'm discussing in the discussion chapter in the conclusions, that IDNs are important tools for DIY archaeology. If an archaeologist had no money, no time, and want to quickly engage people with the research, they can actually create an IDN, low cost and within like a timely manner. The VR video was emotive, as I said, and then I looked more into it and I found out that there is actually current research suggesting that specifically 360 films, that they are then turned into VR environments, they are even better than 3D reconstructed environments because they are way closer to reality and they do not keep the uncanny. A mixed method evaluation methodology that I developed based on pragmatism was a very effective tool actually to evaluate this specific DIY project. So I suggest that similar research might be a good way to do that. The autobiographical model of booting, of storytelling, specifically when it is an IDN, is very effective. So for example, people that have read the story and then did exactly the same story in Twine, they thought that Twine had like 1/3 of the information, whereas it was exactly the same amount of information. But because they had the interactive aspect, they felt that it was way less and more coherent. And lastly, a personal interest of mine after this PhD is to look more into this lack of decolonization project of Greek heritage, how we can talk more about that. And consequently, some limitations and suggestions for further research. So my data were weird, which is that all my participants were from a Western country, they were educated, they were from an industrial country, rich, and from democracies. So that's weird data, and that obviously produces weird results. So it would be really good to see broader data. But again, that was quite inevitable because I did my experiment during COVID. So I had quite limited access to people and everything had to be very confined. And my sample size for quantitative research was quite small. It didn't matter actually for the qualitative, but for quantitative, it might have limited some aspects of it. The lack of interaction in the VR video, it came up a lot because interaction and immersion they are very important for VR as a total. So mine didn't have interaction at all. But again, it fitted my purpose for the medium to be created by the archaeologist. It would be good to see digitally born active IDNs and what is actually their impact on similar projects. There is a lot of research on IDNs, but not in archaeology. There is a whole IDNs studies that mostly is about game design or pedagogy used for schools, but they don't have any archaeological context in that. Explore the combination of media that people liked. Actually, in the CAA in Amsterdam this year, there was a workshop on a tool called Voyager. You might know it, which is a combination of those media. It has text, it has 3D, you can rotate things and you can see them reconstructed, and it also has the interactive aspect. So it is a combination of media, and I'm going to look further into that. Definitely explore the use of 360 films in DIY archaeological projects, especially since they are quite emotive. And yes, I developed a methodology to evaluate my personal DIY project, but it would be great to see more and different methodologies and frameworks on how to evaluate actually these projects. And again, for me, it's important to see more ways how to decolonize the Greek heritage, which is quite difficult. So yeah, I think that's all. Yeah. I'll keep an eye on it's not as well.
So the only way